Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephania Cox. Here are today's top stories. Joe Biden announced his pick for vice president, Senator Kamala Harris. His decision marks the third time in U.S. history that a woman has been nominated. Seattle's police chief announced her resignation after the city defunded its police department. She says they've reached an impasse. St. Louis is among the cities seeing uptick in crime and the latest to have federal officers sent in. A city council legislator tells us the extra police may help, but getting to the root of the problem will be an even bigger challenge. The government's decision to move homeless people into commercial hotels has met with backlash in New York City. The city did it to mitigate the spread of the virus, but some residents say their neighborhoods are no longer safe because of it. Handcuffed and locked in a cage, a British citizen's experience of making a so-called forced confession on China's state television. The footage was also broadcast in the U.S. And a 7-year-old deal between China and the Obama administration allowed Chinese firms to keep their audit books secret in order to protect China's so-called national security. The choice has since brought risks to American investors. During a White House press conference, President Trump commented on the recent violence and looting taking place in some of America's large cities. He's urging state and local leaders to use their resources and to allow law enforcement to put an end to the mayhem.
I want to address the violence, looting and rioting taking place in the Democrat-controlled cities of New York, Portland, Chicago, and Seattle. The mayors and governors of these states and cities have an absolute duty to use all resources necessary to end the violence and all of the injury and death. New York City has an army of great police. I know them very well. And the law enforcement and the New York's finest are as good as it gets, and they should be allowed to do their job. If they do their job, if they're allowed to do their job, the New York City problem will be solved and be solved quickly.
The president also added he's offering all available federal support to stop the violence. He called the burning of the police station in Portland an act of domestic terrorism by left-wing extremist groups. And the Seattle police chief, Carmen Best, has resigned. Her decision comes after the city council voted to defund the department by $4 million. She says she wants the city to move forward and improve its public safety. And she said if she is preventing this, she's ready to step aside. Her resignation takes effect September 2nd.
Protests and riots in Seattle to defund the police have culminated in the city cutting nearly $4 million from the police budget and the police chief stepping down. Chief Carmen Best said she wanted to make sure the department was in good hands and is having the dialogue needed to have true public safety, something that she says would require fresh leadership stepping in.
And I think we had kind of come to an impasse where that wasn't going to happen. That's not being defeated. I think that's leadership and that's being smart.
Best responded to questions about Seattle's chop zone. She said it began as a protest but devolved into lawlessness, at which point she said it was necessary to remove it. At least 2 people died in separate shootings in and around the occupied zone. Last September, Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan announced a plan to move $1.6 million from the city's budget to bolster recruitment and increase retention in the Seattle PD. But the chief said she is unwilling to send the new recruits packing.
The council gave us $1.6 million to make sure that we hired the best and the brightest and the most diverse and brought them on. And less than a year later, we're going to just turn them all away. It feels very duplicitous. And honestly, I have my convictions. I cannot do that.
The budget cuts will reduce the city's police force by 100 officers. Next month, Deputy Chief Adrian Diaz will take the position of police chief. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Attorney General William Barr said he was disheartened by her resignation. He said she worked hard in the face of mob violence to save lives and protect the city. And he said this outcome should be a lesson to leaders about the real costs of defunding the police. And in St. Louis, a 28-year-old man was charged for killing an unarmed neighbor over a parking incident. Missouri's governor says murders in the state are on track for 2020 to be the deadliest year on record. Now 50 federal officers are in St. Louis to help get it under control. One city official welcomes the assistance, but says it will take more than policing if real change is to happen.
St. Louis has seen just over 160 homicides this year. On Monday, a 28-year-old man was charged with killing a neighbor over a parking incident.
Small things like that get individuals to the point where they have taken a life and ready to take more. We have to take action as a city to say residents that act like that will not be allowed to live peacefully in this city. So some people just have to go to jail, and we need these federal officers working in conjunction with our circuit attorney to get people off the streets.
His stance on the matter differs from other city officials in Seattle, Portland, and Chicago who have, despite spiking crime rates, pleaded with the DOJ to get federal officers out of their towns.
This is how I feel, whether it is political or not, or politically charged or not. If the job gets done, then the job gets done.
Bosley says that more law enforcement's hands on deck can be helpful, but in order to make more permanent positive changes, the root of the problem has to be addressed. That is, a change in the culture the youth is exposed to.
Musicians tell us that you can kill you for nothing, I can shoot you for $2,000. Like, these things are things our children grow up and actually imitate. They're going to figure out a way to feel accepted in society. And if society says you got to act like this, then they're going to try to act like that.
He suggests that right now, more policing can help reduce crime and violence. But if we are to look ahead and think about how to prevent future generations from being influenced by a violent mentality, the entire cultural setting needs to change so poor morality is not idolized. Reporting by Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Joe Biden has chosen Senator Kamala Harris as his vice president, just 6 days before the Democratic National Convention. Harris also ran for president but dropped out, and she previously served as California's Attorney General.
Biden's choice is a historic one, marking only the third time a woman has been nominated as a running mate on a major party's presidential ticket. Biden pledged to choose a woman as his VP pick months ago. He says it is a great honor to have picked Harris, calling her a fearless fighter. Kamala Harris was the co-author of the Senate Democrats' police reform legislation. Harris also supported Obamacare and helped legalize marriage equality for all. She co-sponsored legislation to increase the minimum wage to $15 and to defend the rights of refugees and immigrants. Being chosen as vice president means Harris would take over if Biden were to suffer any health issues. Earlier this year, Biden told reporters that he is an old guy and would need to choose a running mate that could immediately take over. The Trump administration's senior advisor commented on the VP pick, saying, quote, "With Harris as his political living will, he is surrendering control of our nation to the radical mob." Not long ago, Kamala Harris called Joe Biden a racist and asked for an apology she never received.
Thousands of New Yorkers are petitioning against the city's decision to convert hotels in the Upper West Side into shelters where infected homeless people are quarantining. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on why one effort to stop the spread is getting pushback.
New York City is converting hotels into shelters for the homeless in hopes of stopping the spread of COVID-19. The idea is to have more room for isolation and social distancing, but after hundreds were relocated to 3 hotels in the Upper West Side, over 5,000 people petitioned the city to move them somewhere else. A neighborhood resident told us it isn't safe anymore.
I've seen people shooting up. I've seen, not too couple of weeks ago, a woman was almost raped. A 50-year-old woman was almost raped.
Residents are complaining that they've seen drug use in public, men passed out on the street, and obscene activities in the neighborhood since the homeless were relocated there. People also say they're worried about the sex offenders also transferred to these hotels. To tackle these problems, the Guardian Angels, a safety patrol group, vowed to send in 60 volunteers to patrol the Upper West Side.
They're letting us know that 86th Street is having a problem, then we head up to 86th Street. They turn 79th Street, we head to 79th Street. You know, once they see our presence, the whole crime thing just drops a little bit. Every time they see us, oh no, I don't want to mess with the Guardians. I don't want to.
Oliver and his wife Sylvia have been angels since the 80s, but they're not just out to prevent crime. They're also looking out for people on the street, like two men they found passed out on the sidewalk.
They were actually completely out cold, drunk, and somebody apparently had punched them out. They had black eye and bruised face. So we asked them, are you guys okay? Do you need an ambulance? Do you need help? And we started talking to them, and it's like, I said, don't, sleeping on the sidewalk here is not going to help you. It's not going to help anybody. If you're tired, you want to get some rest, go to the park, go under the tree, relax, Find a spot where no one's going to bother you, you're not bothering anybody, and just relax and take it easy. It's simple.
A resident from the neighborhood said she's not against the new shelters, but she thinks women and children would have been a better fit for that area.
It would have made more sense to house women and children in a residential neighborhood when you have a population that's elderly in this neighborhood, and they're now terrified to leave.
The Department of Homeless Services told us that it's offensive to basic human decency for neighborhoods to not welcome them. According to city data, over 60 hotels across the city have been converted into homeless shelters. It says the strategy has been successful at curbing the spread, with only 26 people out of thousands in the program reported to be infected as of last week. Miguel Moreno, NTD News, New York.
And American Thought Leaders host Yanya Kellick sits down with COVID-19 whistleblower Dr. Li Mengyan, a top virologist from the Hong Kong School of Public Health. She says in late December, her supervisor asked her to secretly investigate a mysterious virus in Wuhan, China. And in mid-January, she was asked to quietly look into it again. What she discovered was a situation far more serious than the Chinese regime was admitting, and that the WHO knew about it too, but wasn't taking action. So she made a brave decision.
Okay, so tell me, why did you decide to go public with this, knowing the risk?
Okay, because I have been sent twice for this investigation, and back to mid-January when I did the second investigation, I realized the real situation is worse than I thought, and no action from WHO to CCP government to overcome this. So at that time, 17 January, when I see these things, I decide to tell it through my own way. I had to find a way to tell the world, at least to let our government understand their huge pressure from outside. You have to do some action. Not suspend the research from overseas expert. Instead, you should let people go to Wuhan to know what happened, because that is a Chinese New Year time, and huge millions of people do the transportation through Wuhan. That is big center. So it will make the, outbreak soon. But I know I cannot rely on my supervisor and government. So I think I have to tell it through the only media I trust, from Mr. Lu De. And at that time, I know I will face to the life threatened. And as the other Hong Kong protesters or other people who try to tell truth in China, I can be disappeared at any time without even any evidence. But I also cannot face to the fact in the future when I see the outbreak come out, people suffer from this and things still cover up, but I didn't tell the truth at that time. I cannot face to that. I won't forgive myself. And also I realize if at that time I don't tell the truth, that means I lose my capacity to tell the truth in my life. So that's why I decided to deliver the message to Mr. Lu. At least before I get disappeared, I want someone else can deliver the message out.
And that's incredible and very courageous.
Thank you.
You can watch the full interview on American Thought Leaders tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, and again tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. And U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is on a 4-day trip through Europe. While there, he attended a ceremony remembering Western Czechoslovakia's liberation in World War II.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo departed on a 4-day European trip on Monday. The top U.S. diplomats will visit the Czech Republic, Poland, Slovenia, and Austria. In the Czech Republic, Pompeo will visit both Prague and Pilsen. He attended a ceremony commemorating the liberation of Western Czechoslovakia by the U.S. Army in World War II.
75 years ago, our fighting men, led by the great General Patton, cut the Nazi shackles off of Western Czechoslovakia. But it was 30 years ago when Ambassador Shirley Temple Black laid this memorial's founding stone.
He added that 30 years ago was the first time after decades of communist rule and Soviet domination that Czechs and Americans were able to openly commemorate the U.S. military's role in the liberation.
It's worth remembering, even as we celebrate, that because authoritarianism is still alive in Beijing and in Moscow and Tehran, there remains work to do.
Pompeo is expected to cover energy cooperation, China, Russia, and the virus response in talks with his European counterparts.
Up next, Google's new earthquake detecting technology alerts Android phones up to a minute before shaking starts. It could be a great help for developing countries which can't afford traditional sensors and warning systems. And we hear one college's plan to bring thousands of students back in the fall with strict safety measures in place. Some students say they are ready to return, but analysts question if the college is bending to financial pressure imposed by the lockdown.
He ascended to the throne during the most turbulent times in the Joseon dynasty. Despite that, he treated his people well, had great ambitions, and led the country towards a new renaissance. That eventually earned him the title as one of the wisest kings in Korean history. Lee Sun on NTD America.
This season, take an incredible journey through 5,000 years of culture with Shen Yun. Discover why people are calling Shen Yun a visual feast, a pleasure to the ear, an epic tale, a must-see. Shen Yun, an all-new production every year.
Google presented a new earthquake detecting technology that can buy users up to 60 seconds before shaking reaches them. The service works with data provided from Android phones.
Google started detecting earthquakes around the world on Tuesday. They're using a tool called accelerometers in Android phones. It's the biggest ever rollout of earthquake alerting technology. Developing countries can't afford traditional sensors and alerting systems, but they would be able to catch up if Google's approach proves effective.
Every few seconds of notice that you can receive can give you time to get off of a ladder or move away from a dangerous object and overall take covers.
More than 2.5 billion devices around the globe run Google's Android operating system. The company found it could give some users up to a minute to take protective action before the shaking arrives.
So how does this work? Well, Android phones have these tiny accelerometers built into them. that can sense earthquakes. And you can choose to have your phone become part of this network of mini seismometers that are looking for earthquakes around the world.
Those further away would get a smaller notification designed not to stir them from their sleep. Those above the earthquake who cannot be forewarned will get information about immediate safety precautions, such as checking gas valves. Google also plans to provide a data feed to allow businesses to automatically shut off elevators, gas lines, and other sensitive systems ahead of the shaking. The system will not work in regions like China, where Google's Play Services software is blocked. First alerts based on the accelerometer are expected to be sent out next year.
Some U.S. colleges are pushing ahead with plans to reopen their campuses despite concerns of more virus outbreaks. That's as they face an unprecedented threat to their business model.
Students want to be at Tulane. They want the experience of being at Tulane.
Michael Fitz is the president at Tulane University in New Orleans, and he's got an ambitious plan to bring all 14,000 students back to campus with some adjustments.
The interest in sort of a classic undergraduate on-ground experience has never been stronger. Obviously, that experience is going to be a little bit different in the past.
Wearing masks and social distancing are a must. Temporary classrooms and marked seating are being added to spread out students. Tulane is also planning widespread testing.
We're testing everybody before they come back, before they enter campus, and then surveillance testing constantly to make sure that we pick up anything that might be a problem.
College leaders say public health is their top concern, but industry observers see a financial motivation to bringing students back.
College and universities have an impossible choice to make.
He's a skeptic, predicting that universities that reopen now will close again later in the fall once there are outbreaks.
You can't plan around the behavior of college students, and we know that 100% are not going to be compliant with social distancing and masking.
Oh, that makes me tear up.
But despite the new rules, students like Lauren Beagle at Rice University are ready to be at school.
We've been preparing to be at the starting line for months now. Pretty much all we've thought about since March. So definitely excited to get here.
It's perhaps the biggest experiment ever for higher education, and challenges abound.
At the start of the summer, about 66% of U.S. colleges and universities were planning to have some in-person instruction. But now that number has gone down to about 50% as of late July. And coming up, for 7 years, Chinese companies have been allowed to refuse handing over their audit books. That's because of a deal between the regime and the Obama administration. But it's bringing risks for American investors. And in the UK, China's state broadcaster may be facing a ban. It follows allegations that it aired forced confessions found to be a serious violation of UK broadcasting rules.
Special for us.
Bring your family, let your children experience this.
I know my daughter just loves it. When the curtain first opened, I looked out at her face and she was amazed by what she saw.
It's great for the whole family.
And I have a granddaughter. I want her to see something like this because it'll probably enrich her soul and her development as a person. It would change her life.
It's hard for kids to listen to parents all the time, but when they hear it from an outside influence as well, reinforcing your values, that's great.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And her birthday was Friday, so we surprised her with tickets.
I was just so amazed. They're amazing, amazing dancers.
The girls are so elegant and beautiful. and the colors are amazing.
It's just amazing. It's truly breathtaking. Just the story. There's a story behind everything as well, which is amazing. There's so much culture.
It's a bridge between meditation and peace and where we are now in our busy lives.
As an adult and a teacher, it's awesome to see kids reacting and having that positive reaction to the show.
I will see it next year and year after that and the year after that. It is just incredible, absolutely beautiful.
I wish I could see it again, like right now.
Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai was released on bail today. That's after Hong Kongers' outcry over his arrest on Monday when they bought shares of his company en masse. Stocks soared over 1,000%. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
The owner of Hong Kong's pro-democracy newspaper Apple Daily walked out of a police station on Tuesday to Hong Kongers chanting, "Support Apple Daily till the end" around him. Jimmy Lai was arrested by Hong Kong police on Monday on charges of colluding with foreign forces. Following his arrest, stock shares of Apple Daily's parent company skyrocketed more than 1,200%, a powerful sign of local support for freedom of the press. The paper, with a normal circulation of about 70,000, produced 500,000 copies on Tuesday. Its front page read, "Apple Daily will fight on." Locals began lining up at midnight to buy a copy and show their support. Hong Kong activist Agnes Chow, who was also arrested on Monday under the national security law, has been released on bail as well. This is the fourth time the 23-year-old was arrested. She said it was the most scary of her arrests, adding that her passport was confiscated by police. Chow called her arrest political persecution and political suppression.
It's very obvious that the regime and the government is using the national security law to suppress political dissidents. And this kind of situation would not only happen on me, but will happen on more and more Hong Kong people in the future.
Penny Zhou, NTD News.
On Monday, Hong Kong police arrested 10 pro-democracy activists and critics and raided the building of a prominent independent newspaper. It's the first mass arrest after the new national security law was imposed by the Communist Party, severely damaging Hong Kong's freedom. Later that evening, the famous TV tower in Shanghai, China's biggest city, was struck by lightning during a heavy rainstorm. Several videos show the moment when 2 columns of lightning struck the Oriental Pearl Tower. Inside the tower, 9 FM radio programs and 19 TV programs are broadcast. Among them are 12 programs from CCTV, the regime's most powerful media mouthpiece. Accidentally, the tower was given the same name as the city of Hong Kong. Its name is Oriental Pearl, while Hong Kong, given its status as a world financial center, was dubbed the same. Despite the video evidence, the Shanghai Tower Management Department denied the building was hit, instead telling the media that the photos of the building being struck are simply due to the camera angle they were captured from. According to official records, the tower caught fire 10 years ago after a series of thunderstorms. Now to the U.S. mission in Beijing. On Monday, the U.S. Embassy in Beijing and the U.S. Consulate in Shanghai changed the profile images of their social media accounts. The old photo featured the word China, but it's been deleted on the new version. Only the words Beijing or Shanghai remain. The account image for the U.S. Consulate in Shenyang remains the same, but the consulate posted a message containing a new image without the word China. The images of the U.S. consulates in Wuhan and Guangzhou also remain unchanged. Speculation is now circulating online. One netizen asked if it's a sign that the U.S. is preparing to deny the legitimacy of the Chinese communist regime. Another guessed it means the U.S. wants to separate the Chinese people from the communist regime. Another even linked the move to Taiwan, calling it a sign that the U.S. plans to establish diplomatic relations with Taiwan. Since 2013, Chinese companies have had access to the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, and other exchanges without fully complying with the Sarbanes-Oxley accounting rules. These rules protect U.S. investors from making bad investments due to faulty financial information. This concession was made in a memorandum of understanding during the Obama administration. It allows Chinese firms to refuse to hand over their audit books to protect national security. The memorandum was executed 7 years ago by the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, or PCAOB. The PCAOB has themselves admitted that federal regulators can't ensure that the financial data provided by Chinese companies is correct. In a recent statement, PCAOB said, unfortunately, since signing the MOU in 2013, Chinese corporation has not been sufficient for the PCAOB to obtain timely access to relevant documents and testimony necessary to carry out our mission consistent with the core principles identified above, nor have consultations undertaken through the MOU resulted in improvements. This has left global investors, including Americans, with potentially risky investments, totaling as much as almost $2 trillion. Several Chinese companies have admitted to fabricating revenue numbers.
The UK's media regulator is deciding on a penalty for China's state-owned television operating in Britain. It had aired forced confessions from a British citizen who had been drugged, handcuffed and locked inside a cage while in a Chinese prison. From London, our UK correspondent Jane Werrell sent this report.
China Global Television Network is designated a foreign agent in the United States. It chose London as a hub for a planned European expansion, moving into West London offices in 2018. Those expansion plans, though, may soon come to a halt. In July, the UK's media watchdog Ofcom ruled that the network seriously violated broadcasting rules when it aired footage of British citizen Peter Humphrey making a coerced confession from a prison in China. I asked him what happened.
The lenses of all these cameras are pointing through the bars of the cage at me. And I'm dopey because I've been given this sedation pill 45 minutes before.
Working as private fraud investigators in China, Humphrey and his wife were embroiled in a bribery investigation into a top manager in China, working at British pharmaceutical giant GlaxoSmithKline. Detained in July 2013, he was put in a cell with about 12 others.
The toilet was a hole in the corner of the floor. I was taken to interrogation cells almost every day to be interrogated by the police inside a cage.
He was accused of illegally obtaining and selling Chinese citizens' data, a charge he contested. Before facing trial, he says he was locked in a chair in a large cage.
Inspector Ding then proceeds to be the voice of a journalist, asking questions from a list that he's got on a clipboard. And every time I don't answer the way he hopes I will answer, he repeats. He does a retake, as it were. Having you locked in a cage in order to force you to do something is a form of torture.
He says a heavily edited version was aired on CGTN, then known as CCTV News. It's the English-language counterpart of state-owned China Central Television. Ofcom concluded its investigation in July and is now deciding what sanctions to impose on CGTN. Reports show that CGTN just rehired a former Ofcom director, Nick Pollard. He had quit because of concerns over the channel's coverage of the Hong Kong protests, which Ofcom found broke UK rules of impartiality. Ofcom is investigating other so-called confessions aired by CGTN.
The idea that you film a witness under duress giving a statement without their consent is incredibly serious, and also potentially allegations of some form of torture. Do that once is very serious. To have that 3 times, if proved guilty, is very, very serious. Ofcom will undoubtedly consider a fine. My best estimate is that it would be in 6 figures. They may even consider revocation of licence.
This was a complaint filed by an individual taking on the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda apparatus and saying, you have committed crimes against me under the UK broadcasting law.
Still feeling the trauma from his time in prison, he says his purpose now is to address the wrongs committed against him and his family and to help others in a similar situation. Jane Webber, NTD News, London.
Still to come, Russia has approved a vaccine for the virus. It's the first in the world to do so, but the WHO says it doesn't have enough information to evaluate it yet. And Hong Kong companies will soon need to label their exports as made in China. We talked to a China expert to see what impact it's going to have after the break.
90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
What does it mean to devote your life to the truth? Does it mean investigating communist subversion here in America? Does it mean exposing the deadly fentanyl crisis in the Midwest? Or spending late nights and covering deep government corruption? Because at a time when America's traditional values are under attack, it's the responsibility of righteous journalists to uphold truth and tradition.
Russia announced a new vaccine it says it has developed against the virus. But the WHO says it doesn't have enough information yet to evaluate it.
Russia has announced a vaccine against the CCP virus. They have received requests for over 1 billion doses. Chief Executive Officer of the Russian Direct Investment Fund, Kirill Dmitriev, called the development a historic Sputnik moment. He compared it to the Soviet Union's 1957 launch of Sputnik 1, the world's first satellite.
We have also built partnership to produce the vaccine in 5 countries, and we now have production capability of 500 million vaccines that can be produced in the next 12 months.
Russia's health ministry gave regulatory approval for the vaccine after less than 2 months of human testing. The speed at which Russia is rolling out its vaccine shows its determination to win the global race for a vaccine, but it has stirred concerns that it may be putting national prestige before science and safety. The WHO says it has not received enough information on the Russian vaccine yet to evaluate it. Any new vaccine has to undergo clinical trials in 3 phases. After all phases are complete, the producer needs to submit a petition for licensing with the authority in their country and in the countries where they want to sell the vaccine.
More and more Americans are looking to the water for a mental escape from the pandemic. And that's good news for the boat industry. Across the U.S., boat dealers are reporting unprecedented sales.
Sailing is becoming an increasingly popular pastime for those who can afford it. Marinas and boat repair shops are swamped by a wave of interest. People are ready to escape on the water.
I think this whole thing is more stressful than I think a lot of us acknowledge. And so the timing is perfect. I mean, I'm really looking forward to getting away mentally.
Wayne Goldman, who is president of Atomic Tuna Yachts in Alameda, California, says sales have shot up recently, hitting a record in July.
We just had our best month ever. I think we sold 12 boats last month. We normally 3 or 4 boats a month is a good month for us.
People are looking for something to do at a time when the pandemic has limited recreational activities. A recent survey by the Marine Retailers Association of the Americas showed more than 70% of boat dealers were either completely out of boats or had low inventory. Oceans, lakes, and ponds are good places for people to socially distance while having fun at the same time.
It gives you the option to have guests aboard, I think, safely, in an open-air environment where people are getting to enjoy something that's pretty special in a time when we're dealing with some pretty grim stuff. So.
The U.S. Coast Guard recommends safety courses for new boaters, but hands-on instruction has been hard to find this summer. Some boaters have turned to online safety courses instead.
A notice from the U.S. government says imported items that are labeled Made in Hong Kong will have to be changed to Made in China instead. The change is expected to take effect next month.
The U.S. Customs and Border Protection says products made in Hong Kong and exported to the U.S. will need to be labeled Made in China starting next month. In July, the United States determined that Hong Kong is, quote, no longer sufficiently autonomous to justify differential treatment in relation to China. Hong Kong companies will get a 45-day grace period to mark that their exports originate from China. We spoke with business professor Frank Hsieh. He says the Hong Kong dollar might be the next to be negatively impacted.
With Hong Kong being part of China, I think the Hong Kong dollar will lose its prestige in Hong Kong's banking and financial system.
He says the change will largely affect businesses on the Chinese side.
The major impact should be felt by the Chinese side because they just lost another channel for them to export.
A couple of New Yorkers told us they are not very confident with products labeled Made in China compared to labeled Made in Hong Kong.
I think China is a vast country, and so the question is something made in a factory in the middle of nowhere where the regulations aren't being followed. Whereas Hong Kong, I believe, is more of an international community, and therefore it feels to me like it would, the odds are it would be higher quality.
I probably wouldn't buy it. Like China's products the quality aren't as good, and Hong Kong is I just feel like their quality is better.
Hong Kong exporters will pay the same trade tariffs as Chinese exporters. The change is expected to come September 25th. Phil Zhou, NTD News.
Up next, the Belarusian opposition leader was forced to leave the country the next day after the country's presidential election. And many people have heard of Renaissance master Raphael and his paintings, but do you know what he looked like? More on these after the break.
When you look at TV networks in America, a soundbite and fight-it-out culture prevails on news and commentary programs. As a Canadian, I'm fascinated with America, and I wanted to offer American thought leaders an opportunity to share their thoughts in a deep dive format where we can explore their ideas together. And so American Thought Leaders was born. The world's most brilliant thinkers believed that open discourse was the key to greatness. However, all around the world, we see that discourse is being stifled and political agendas have subverted media. The Epoch Times launched its Global Thought Leaders program to bring back this great tradition of free thought. As the host of American Thought Leaders, every week I interview some of the most intriguing minds on the most pressing issues of our time. Be sure to check out our new episodes every week.
Over to Europe, Belarusian President Lukashenko was re-elected for the 6th time on Sunday, and the opposition leader was forced to leave the country the next day. NTD UK's Neil Woodrow will bring us news from Europe.
Thanks. Welcome to the UK newsroom with UK and European news. Belarus's opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya has left the country after rejecting this weekend's presidential election results.
In a tearful video posted to YouTube, Tikhanovskaya said she made the decision to see her children. Her campaign team claims she was forced to leave the country. She evacuated her children from Belarus in the run-up to the election after receiving threats.
People, please be careful. No lie is a good price for what is happening now.
The 37-year-old former English teacher ran for office after her blogger husband was jailed by Lukashenko's regime and prevented from running himself. Tikhanovskaya's departure follows a second night of protests that erupted after Alexander Lukashenko claimed a landslide victory. Bloggers have called for a general strike starting at lunchtime in Belarus on Wednesday.
And France's data privacy watchdog is opening a preliminary investigation into TikTok. The short video app is owned by Chinese internet giant ByteDance. TikTok is already under investigation over privacy concerns in the US and European Union and is banned in India. US officials warned the app can act as spyware for the Chinese regime since by law, all Chinese companies have to hand over user data if requested. And Britain and France agree to work on a plan to shut down a migrant route across the English Channel. British Immigration Minister Chris Philp visited Paris to discuss a number of new measures with French officials.
We have reaffirmed our unshakable shared commitment to making sure this route of crossing the Channel is made unviable. It is facilitated by ruthless criminal gangs, it puts lives at risk, and it is totally unnecessary.
So far this year, over 4,000 people have successfully crossed the English Channel in small boats, more than twice the number of the whole of last year. Both parties agree the high numbers making the illegal crossing are unacceptable, and the UK is prepared to support the plan financially. And British Prime Minister has blocked a proposal to invite Scottish leader to join the UK government's cabinet meeting. Financial Times reports that Cabinet Office Minister Michael Gove suggested the plan as a way of containing growing public support in Scotland for independence, but Boris Johnson rejected the idea. The ruling party in Scotland is the pro-independent Scottish National Party, and a recent poll shows that 54% of Scots favour independence. And German Foreign Minister says Russia is not cooperating to solve a Berlin murder case.
In Moscow, German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas said Germany has made a total of 17 requests to Russia for information connected with a murder in Berlin, but so far there's been no reply. In August 2019, a former Chechen separatist fighter who had fled to Germany was shot in a Berlin park. Speaking with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov, Maas said that difficult issues like this should be openly discussed and called for Russia's cooperation.
Since we know that we also need Russia to solve the many conflicts and crises across the world, it is important that we have good bilateral relations.
German prosecutors have filed murder charges against a Russian national in the case and accused the Russian government of ordering the killing.
And Britain's Rolls-Royce is carrying out extra inspections on some of its Trent engines after cracks were found on a small number of them. The Trent XWB engines power Airbus A350 planes. None have experienced abnormal in-flight operations. The 100 engines with the problem have been in service for 4 to 5 years. Cracks were not found in newer engines. Cost of fixing the problem is likely to be in the tens of millions, unlike Boeing's Trent 1000 engine issue, which is set to cost the company around $3.1 billion. Moving on, the true face of influential Renaissance artist Raphael has been revealed. The genius died 500 years ago at 37. He sought perfection in all he did, but may not have liked his nose. In 1833, a plaster cast was made of an exhumed skull presumed to be his, but some doubt remained. Now, forensic anthropologists and other experts have used the cast to create a 3D computer model of his face. Molecular biologist Mattia Falconi commented, "The 3D model shows the eyes and mouth in the portraits are his, but he has been kind to himself about his nose. Scientists now want to subject Raphael's remains to DNA testing to determine other details about how he looked, including his eye and hair colour. That's all from the UK newsroom for today. Thank you for watching. Back over to New York.
Thanks, Neil. And coming up, Kenyans become tourists in their own country. The lack of international border crossings brings Kenyans out to witness wild beasts in migration. And a volcano erupts in Indonesia. Day turns to night as ash clouds plume, and locals are warned to stay away. That and more after the break. Indonesia's Mount Sinabung spewed a giant ash cloud over 3 miles into the sky. It gave out a thundering noise and the sky turned dark during its second eruption in 3 days. Dramatic footage shows a giant cloud of thick ash rising from the peak in North Sumatra. It blanketed the daytime sky and turned it into darkness. The volcanology agency advised everyone to stay at least 2 miles from the volcano and to wear masks due to the falling ash. No casualties have been reported. A spokeswoman for the Civil Aviation Authority said flights were still operating in the region. And Kenya is home to many natural wonders known to attract tourism from around the world. But this year, travel prices fell amid the pandemic, allowing locals to enjoy what their own country has to offer.
Normally, the White Plains of Kenya's Masai Mara National Reserve are crowded with international tourists, aiming to catch a glimpse of a lion's hunt during the annual wildebeest migration. But this year, the pandemic means Kenyans had it all to themselves.
Because the costs have been reduced, I think, to half. And we feel now it is affordable for us to come and see the nature and the beautiful things that are around our country.
The event is very well received by those who venture out to see it. One woman that went on a tour said that the migration should be the first world wonder.
I've seen migration so many times, but it never gets boring. It's something spectacular. We keep coming. Like today, we've been around for like close to 3 hours. We had lunch close by, and we thank God that we didn't leave because we saw it and it's new every day.
The pandemic has, in some ways, brought good news for local animal watchers. That's because now they can finally afford to see the beauty of their country. But it's bad for conservationists who rely on tourism revenue to pay for park rangers and protection.
At the moment, we are trying to revive the sector through the domestic tourism strategy. And that's why we ask Kenyans, it is Kenyans to support tourism so that the economy and jobs can be created.
As part of that push, the Kenyan government was using celebrities to showcase local attractions like the Mara. This weekend, thousands of mostly Kenyan visitors traveled to the park to witness the migration. There were few foreigners. Kenya only resumed international flights on August 1st. By June, Kenya had already lost over $700 million in tourism revenue, about half of last year's total. Tourist resorts are now required to observe strict social distancing and hygiene measures, but have been allowed to reopen.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.